I always believed the coldest thing about a Buffalo winter was the snow, until I stood inside my father's house on Christmas Eve and watched him pour a pot of boiling soup over my 7-year-old daughter's head. My little girl's scream filled that room, and while she screamed, my sister stood 3 feet away, calmly building the lie that was supposed to bury me, a lie designed to hide her own guilt and destroy what was left of my name. They were so certain of how this would end. They believed that because we shared blood, I would do what I had always done: swallow it, stay quiet, apologize for existing too loudly. But as I gathered my sobbing child off that hardwood floor, something inside me froze solid. Not grief, not panic, something colder and far more patient. In that moment, I stopped being the daughter they had spent 30 years training, and I started drafting a plan. A quiet, surgical, ice-cold plan to take their entire world apart, piece by piece. Before I open this wound all the way and tell you everything, I want to know how far my voice is carrying tonight. What city are you watching from? What country? And what time is it on your clock right now? Drop it in the comments. Reading your replies reminds me that I am not standing in this darkness alone, that there are people out there, all over the world, standing with me. My name is Claire. For 31 years, I lived under one foolish belief: that blood was the highest currency a person could have. That family meant you were supposed to open your own veins and bleed quietly forever just to keep the people who made you comfortable. I grew up in a house where love was never given. It was loaned at interest. I was the older daughter, the dependable one, the one trained from childhood to comply in silence, while my younger sister, Ashley, was handled like fragile glass that the rest of us existed to protect. For most of my life, I told myself a story. I told myself that if I just worked a little harder, gave a little more, smiled through one more disappointment, then one day my father, Gerald, would finally look at me the way he looked at Ashley, with pride, with warmth. It took watching him scald my child to understand the truth I had been running from. Some people do not want your love. They just want to see how much they can drain out of you before you finally fall down. My life today looks nothing like the one I came from, and that is because of exactly two people: my husband Ethan and our brave, bright 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Ethan is not the kind of man who just says he loves you. He is the kind who builds a wall around your peace and stands at the gate. When I met him, I was a ghost running on caffeine and guilt, dragging the weight of a family that did not respect me. Ethan was the first person who ever showed me what safe actually felt like. He held my hand the nights I cried over phone calls that never came. He reminded me over and over that I did not owe anyone my sanity just because we happened to share a last name. And then there is Emma. She has these huge, trusting brown eyes and a laugh that can chase the dark right out of any room. She is my whole world. The little girl I swore I would protect from every cold thing I had grown up inside of. We built a quiet, good life together in a small house on the edge of Buffalo, New York, far away from the fog of my father's demands. For a long time, I honestly believed I had gotten out. I had a steady job, a husband who adored me, and a daughter who filled every day with noise and joy. I thought distance was enough to keep us safe. But here is the thing about a family like mine. They do not forgive you for escaping. The scapegoat is not supposed to leave. They wait. They watch from a distance. And they wait for the one moment that will let them pull you back into the chaos, completely blind to the fact that you are no longer the frightened little girl who used to live there. Before I cut this story all the way open, let me ask you again. Which part of the world are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave it in the comments below. It gives me a strange kind of comfort, knowing who is out there in the dark with me in all these different corners of the world. Long before Ethan, long before Emma, I was not really a person in that house. I was a resource. The day I finished school, my father made my role in life perfectly clear. I existed to fund the family, specifically to fund Ashley. For almost 7 years, I worked myself into the ground. I would clock out of a full day at a corporate office and drive straight across the city to a second job, an overnight shift at a logistics center, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night if I was lucky, and every dollar I earned vanished instantly into the bottomless pit of what my family needed. I paid down my father's maxed out credit cards, thousands of dollars on watches he could not afford, steak dinners, weekend trips with his golf friends, all to maintain an image. At the very same time, I was footing the bill for Ashley's private college tuition, her semester abroad, her car, and an endless river of shopping she never once said thank you for. My father and Ashley operated like a team, a coordinated, two-person operation. To Gerald, Ashley was the masterpiece, a brilliant little reflection of himself who deserved the entire world and should not have to lift a finger to get it. And me, I was the engine, the thing that quietly ran in the background and paid for the illusion. If I ever questioned a charge, if I ever hesitated for even a second before handing over my money, my father knew exactly which button to press. He would look at me with this cold, disgusted expression and tell me I was selfish, ungrateful, that I wanted to sabotage my little sister's future because I could not stand to see anyone do better than me. So I kept my head down, I swallowed it, and I kept working those double shifts until my hands ached and my eyes burned. The only reason I survived those years was my mother, Margaret. My mom was a soft-spoken, gentle woman, and she had been worn down to almost nothing by years inside that marriage. My father treated her like staff. He talked over her, dismissed her, made every decision without her. She did not have the strength to fight him, not for herself, and I think it broke her heart that she could not fight him for me either. But she saw me. She was the only one in that house who ever looked at me and saw a daughter instead of a bank account. On the rare nights I made it home before midnight, she would sit with me at the kitchen table in the dark, and she would take my tired hands in hers, and she would whisper to me, "I am so sorry, Claire. You are carrying a weight that was never yours to carry. One day you are going to build a life of your own. And when you do, I want you to run. Run as far from this house as your legs will take you. Do not look back." She was my anchor, the only person who ever made me feel like a human being instead of a paycheck. And eventually, I did exactly what she told me to do. I met Ethan. I chose my own happiness for the first time in my life. I got married, I moved out, and I shut off the faucet. I stopped letting them drain my account. The backlash was brutal. My father called me a traitor. Ashley told everyone who would listen that I had abandoned my own family. But Ethan stood between me and all of it, like a wall, and he never moved. And soon after, our daughter Emma was born. But my heart never stopped aching for my mother, because the moment I left, her health began to fall apart. My father did nothing. Ashley did less. I was the one who drove across the city on weekends to take her to appointments, to sit with her, to make sure she ate. I balanced my brand new family and her care alone because no one else would. When my mother finally closed her eyes for the last time, a piece of my own heart went into the ground with her. Her funeral was a sickening performance. My father stood at the front in a black suit, accepting condolences, dabbing at dry eyes, playing the heartbroken widower for the neighbors. Ashley wept loudly enough for the back row to hear, and I stood at the very back of the room, completely hollow, mourning the only person who had ever truly protected me. But the real betrayal came the week after. The moment the funeral flowers wilted, the phone calls stopped. My father never once asked how I was holding up. Ashley blocked me on every platform she had, and the message could not have been clearer if they had mailed it to me. Now that my mother was gone, and now that my wallet was permanently closed, I no longer existed. They threw me away like garbage, and then came 5 years of total silence. 5 years. No birthday cards for Emma, no holiday calls, nothing. As far as that family was concerned, I was dead. And honestly, for a while I thought being dead to them was the safest place I had ever been. Those 5 years of silence worked like a wall around my marriage, around my peace, around my daughter. I let myself relax. I let myself believe it was finally over. And then, in the second week of December, an envelope showed up in our mailbox. It was heavy, cream-colored, expensive, a formal invitation to my father's annual Christmas Eve party, and tucked inside, in his careful handwriting, was a note. Claire, life is too short to stay strangers. Your mother would not have wanted us living like this. Bring Ethan and bring my granddaughter. Let us be a family again. Dad. I stared at that card for hours. Ethan was instantly, deeply suspicious. His whole body changed when he read it. Claire, he said gently, he has not called you in 5 years. Not once. People do not just wake up one morning and become someone new. But my heart, that stubborn little girl, part of my heart that had spent 3 decades begging to be loved, overrode every logical thing he said. I told myself maybe losing my mother had finally cracked something open in him. Maybe he wanted to know Emma. Maybe, just this once, he meant it. So I said yes. I spent days picking out the perfect little holiday dress for Emma. Deep red velvet with a white collar. She twirled in it in the living room and asked me if Grandpa would think she looked pretty. I told her yes. God forgive me, I told her yes. On Christmas Eve, as the heavy lake-effect snow started swallowing the streets of Buffalo, we loaded the car and drove out to the house I grew up in. The second my father opened that door, the fantasy shattered. There were no warm hugs, no tears. He gave me a stiff, one-armed sort of sideways pat, barely looked at Ethan, and completely ignored Emma, who was standing there beaming, holding out a gift box we had wrapped together that morning with both hands. His eyes went straight to my coat, my shoes, my watch, pricing me out the way he always did. You're early, he muttered, glancing at his watch. The Hendersons and the rest of the association will be here soon. Put your coats in the den. Ashley was on the sofa in the living room, looking flawless and bored out of her mind. When she saw me, she did not get up. She lifted her eyes from her phone, gave me a little flick of her fingers, not even a real wave, and went straight back to typing. The house was decked out. Pine garlands, gold ribbon, the smell of expensive food drifting from the kitchen. And within 20 minutes, the real reason we had been invited became painfully obvious. My father's wealthy friends, the neighborhood association people he wanted to impress, had apparently been asking questions. Questions about why his older daughter was never around anymore, why he never mentioned her. We had not been invited to heal anything. We had been invited to be props, living proof that Gerald was a good father and a devoted grandfather, just in time for the guests to see it. In the corner of the living room, on a heavy oak side table, was my mother's memorial, a large engraved frame, glass and silver, holding her favorite photograph, the one where she is laughing in the garden, the way she almost never got to in that house. Beside it, a single white candle flickered, next to a small vase of flowers. Seeing her face put a lump in my throat the size of a fist. I walked over, pulled Emma close to my side, and quietly told her how much her grandmother had loved her, how she had held her as a newborn and cried. Emma reached out one small hand and touched the very edge of the wooden table, careful, gentle. She looks happy, Mommy, she whispered. She was, I told her. Right then, she really was. That is when Ashley got up. She was on her phone, in the middle of some furious, thumb-blurring argument with someone, and she started pacing, heels cracking against the hardwood, eyes locked on her screen, completely gone from the room around her, back and forth, faster, angrier. And as she stormed past that oak table, her elbow, flung out mid-text, caught the edge of the frame. It did not slide. It launched. The heavy glass and silver frame flew off the table and slammed into the hardwood floor, and the thick glass exploded. Hundreds of jagged, glittering shards scattering across the floor right at Emma's feet. Emma gasped and froze, terrified by the crash. Ashley stopped dead. She stared down at the wreckage of our mother's memorial, and for 1/2 second, the anger drained out of her face, and pure panic flooded in. She knew exactly what she had done, but Ashley has never in her life taken responsibility for a single thing, and her oldest survival instinct kicked in before her conscience ever could. She looked up. She saw our father coming through the kitchen doorway, and she lifted one manicured finger and pointed it directly at my 7-year-old daughter. "Dad, look what she did," Ashley shrieked, and her voice was dripping with something rehearsed and vicious. "This little brat threw a tantrum and smashed the last beautiful thing we have of Mom. She did it on purpose." My father came through that doorway holding a wide stainless steel pot. He had been making his famous potato leek soup for the guests, and it was still going, actively steaming, the surface rolling at a hard boil. When Ashley's words hit him, his face twisted into something I had seen 1,000 times growing up. Pure, instant, blinding rage. Every bit of the resentment he had carried for 5 years. Resentment at me for leaving, for shutting off the money, for daring to build a life he did not control. All of it surged up at once and landed on my child. He did not ask a question. He did not look at the floor, the glass, the angle, the truth. "You careless little animal," he roared, and he lunged. Before Ethan or I could even understand what was happening, before either of us could close the 3 feet between us and her, my father reached the edge of the rug, raised that heavy steel pot, and tipped the entire scalding contents down over Emma's head and shoulder. The boiling soup hit her hair, the right side of her face, her neck, her shoulder. There was 1 full second of total, horrible silence. And then Emma made a sound I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. A high, raw, blistering scream of pure agony. That scream broke something inside me, permanently and forever. In a single heartbeat, the guilty, obedient, head-down daughter I had been my whole life simply died, and something primal stood up in her place. I hit the floor. My hands were moving before my brain caught up, scooping Emma into my arms, away from the steam, away from him. Her skin was already going an angry, blistered red, where the thick liquid clung to her dress and her cheek. I looked up. My father stood there, the empty pot still in his hand, his chest heaving, and on his face was not one flicker of remorse, just panic. Panic at what he would be caught doing. Ashley had shrunk back against the wall, phone still in her fist, staring with wide, cowardly eyes. When my father took 1 step toward us, mumbling something, I did not think at all. I drove up off the floor and I shoved him, both hands into his chest, every ounce of weight and rage I had, and sent him stumbling back into the kitchen counter. The pot clattered across the tile. "Do not you dare touch her," I roared, in a voice I did not recognize as my own. Ethan was already moving, fast, silent, lethal. He did not waste a single second screaming at them. He took Emma from my arms, carried her straight into the downstairs bathroom, turned the shower to cool, and let gentle water run over her face and shoulder to stop the burn from going deeper. Emma was sobbing, hysterical, her tiny fists clutching at his shirt. And through her cries I heard Ethan's voice, calm, level, hard as granite, as he pulled out his phone and dialed. "I need an ambulance and police at 84 Lakeshore Drive," he said. "A 7-year-old girl has severe scald burns to her face, neck, and shoulder from boiling liquid. This was an intentional assault by an adult. Send police now." I stood in the hallway, planted in front of that bathroom door like a wall, my whole body shaking with a sick mix of terror and a freezing, focused fury. My father leaned against the counter, smoothing down his shirt, trying to gather himself. And then his voice dropped into that low, familiar, oily register I had grown up obeying. "Claire, tell your husband to hang up that phone. Right now. This was an accident." The girl knocked the frame over, panicked, and ran straight into the pot as I was carrying it out. "You are about to blow up this entire family over a clumsy little mistake." Ashley nodded fast from her corner, her voice trembling but full of venom. "Yeah, it is her own fault. She should not have been running around Mom's table." I looked at the two of them. For 30 years, that exact tactic had worked on me. For 30 years, they had rewritten reality again and again, until I was always the villain in the story of my own life. The crazy one, the ungrateful one, the problem. But standing there, listening to my daughter whimper under the running water, the last thread connecting me to these two people, the very last one, snapped clean. A quiet, final little sound, the heartbreak just vanished, and in its place came something cold and steady and absolutely certain. They were not my family. They were a threat, a pair of dangerous, hostile strangers who had just put their hands on my child. I wiped one tear off my cheek, looked my father dead in his cold eyes, and I said it slowly so he would feel it. Enjoy this house while you can, Dad, because by the time the snow stops falling tonight, I am going to make sure the state of New York puts you in a cage. 7 minutes. That is all it took before the quiet, snowy street outside lit up red and blue. The sirens cut out at the curb, and 3 Buffalo officers came through the front door, 2 paramedics right behind them. The medics took over the bathroom immediately, gently wrapping Emma in burn dressings to stabilize her for transport. My heart shattered all over again, watching her tiny body wheeled out into the freezing dark on a stretcher, with Ethan climbing into the back of the ambulance, refusing to leave her side for even a second. I stayed. I had a war to win, and it was happening right there in that living room. My father launched into the performance of his life. He let his shoulders sag, he pulled out a fragile, wet-eyed look I had never once seen him wear, and he turned it on the lead officer. "Officer, thank God you are here," he said, voice cracking on cue. "It was a horrible accident. My granddaughter was running wild. She smashed her late grandmother's picture frame, and when she panicked, she bolted backward, right into the hot soup I was carrying out. I tried to catch it. I could not. And my older daughter, she has always been unstable. Officer, she just attacked me out of nowhere." Ashley stood behind him, nodding hard, wiping at fake tears. "I saw the whole thing. It was just a terrible accident. Our sister overreacted." The officer turned to me, notebook open. I took one slow breath, and when I spoke, my voice was steady, calm, professional, completely empty of the hysteria they were counting on. "Officer, my name is Claire. My father and my sister are lying to you. This was not an accident. My sister knocked that frame over herself while she was on her phone. She immediately blamed my daughter. And then my father, without asking a single question, deliberately poured a pot of boiling soup over my 7-year-old child. I let that sit for a beat. Then I lifted my hand and pointed. And we do not have to argue about any of it. On the corner wall of the living room, mounted in plain sight, was a small white security camera, not hidden, not secret, a completely ordinary, visible Nest camera that my father had installed years ago to keep an eye on the house and the front porch. In their blind rage, in the chaos of building their lie, my father and Ashley had both completely forgotten it was sitting right there, recording the whole time. "Officer," I said quietly, "that camera is on. It is active and it is cloud connected. Everything that happened in this room for the last 20 minutes is on that footage, in full light. Please, play it." The lead officer nodded, walked to the home hub, and asked for access. And right there, in that beautifully decorated living room, with the candle still flickering beside my mother's broken frame, they played it back. The truth filled the screen. The video showed Ashley, completely lost in her phone, pacing, her arms swinging out and smashing the frame. It captured the exact instant she pointed at Emma and screamed her lie. And then, undeniable, in clear light, it showed my father storming out of that kitchen, locking his eyes onto my terrified daughter, raising the pot and emptying it over her head. No stumble, no accident. No child running into anything, just an adult man, deliberately, scalding a little girl. The color drained out of Ashley's face, and she staggered back a step. My father went completely rigid, staring at the screen, watching his own lie dissolve in front of the law. The lead officer did not hesitate for a second. He turned, pulled the cuffs off his belt, and walked straight to my father. "Gerald Hayes, you are under arrest for felony child abuse and assault with a deadly weapon. Put your hands behind your back." The steel clicked shut over his wrists. Then they turned to Ashley and told her she was being detained for filing a false report and obstruction of justice. As they walked the two of them out into the snow, I turned my back on them both, walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove straight to the hospital. To my daughter. What came after was swift and brutal and grounded entirely in cold, recorded fact. The Erie County District Attorney's Office built their whole case around that security footage. It was the anchor of everything. There was no version of events to argue, no room for my father's charm or Ashley's tears. The camera had seen all of it. Faced with the video and Emma's medical records, their defense fell apart completely in that courtroom. There was nothing left to spin. The judge showed zero patience for what was on that tape. My father was convicted of felony child abuse and assault with a deadly weapon. Because the victim was a defenseless 7-year-old, and because the act was so plainly deliberate, the judge handed down a firm sentence: 5 years in state prison with no early parole. Ashley, for her role in it, for fabricating the story, for framing a child and lying to the police, was convicted of filing a false report and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 1 year in county jail, plus mandatory community service. The permanent record ended Ashley's marketing career before it ever really started. In her field, she became unhireable overnight, and the local news coverage attached a lasting public shame to both of their names that no amount of charm was ever going to scrub off. But while their lives collapsed, ours finally found something I had stopped believing was real: peace. After weeks of specialized burn care, Emma healed completely. Her skin recovered with no permanent scarring, and slowly, beautifully, her bright, ringing laugh came back, and it filled our little house in Buffalo again, like it had never left. The day we walked out of that courthouse was the day I closed that chapter forever. I blocked every remaining number, every account, every thread that still tied me to them. I cut it all, and I finally understood the thing my mother had been trying to tell me for years, in the dark, at that kitchen table. Blood does not make a family. Love makes a family. Protection makes a family. Respect makes a family. Standing in the spring sun with Ethan's hand in mine and Emma's hand in my other, I knew for the first time in my entire life that I was completely surrounded by my real family, safe and free. Looking back at that snowy Christmas Eve in Buffalo, I have realized the hardest part was not watching Emma's body heal. It was accepting a truth I had spent 30 years refusing to see: that the people who were supposed to love me the most were the ones capable of the deepest cruelty. But justice came. My daughter is whole again. Her laugh fills our home, and Ethan and I have built a life rooted in something real, genuine, unshakable safety, completely free of the cold shadow of where I came from. Karma did not just catch up to Gerald and Ashley. It drew a clear, bright line between the people who were truly my family and the people who only ever shared my blood. So tell me in the comments below, do you think I did the right thing putting my own father behind bars? And if you had been standing in that room, what would you have done? I will be reading every single reply.